different region, all the moisture content in the air, all determines the chemical behavior. This company used analytics to the maximum extent. As soon as this big data concept started thriving, they were one of the first customers of HANA. They used in and out all the algorithms to find out the best fragrances that can be sold in the market. So this was the thing that today's age does not need people who can manage data. We don't need engineers who can say how to query or how to present or how to make a good UI and all. Today's era needs people who can make decisions based on data. That is the paradigm shift I see in this industry. Today we are not in need of people who can make syntactical queries.
Krishna, I think you touched upon a very good point, but from a Hadoop ecosystem perspective, I mean, I think you covered a bit of HANA. Can you talk for the audience, can you talk a little bit about how you think Hadoop and HANA are positioned? Maybe that can explain the context a little bit more for the audience here, right?
Okay, now with Hadoop, it is everywhere, now focused on all industries. You talk about Facebook data, Twitter data, all the previous people, the gentleman here spoke about it. Now we are positioning HANA for purely business. Basically, what could you do with a sales forecast? All the SAP businesses, the ERP data that we have got from our customers. So SAP HANA is in memory, it is columnar store, it is for big data, but not for purely social analytics. It is purely for business decisions.
Understand. So I think
that's where we leverage the customer data,
sure.
We leverage the social data, and we leverage the forecasting power to derive business decisions that could earn revenue to customers.
I think it goes back to one of the points that the audience asked in the last session, which is, how do you balance the open source ecosystem with the enterprise ecosystem? I think my answer to that would be, when you look at it, every technology goes through a chasm. I don't know if anybody has heard of Moore's, Jeffrey Moore's, the chasm, this thing. If not, I would recommend that you actually go through it. Technology goes through an adoption curve, and what happens is there are early adopters in any given technology. In fact, Hortonworks has predicted that Hadoop ecosystem will actually be crossing the chasm, this year. So given that, there is going to be a mainstream adoption of open source technologies. But to answer your question, in my opinion, a lot of enterprises actually look for whether a technology has matured. If the technology has matured, then they can very well take open source software. A lot of websites run, enterprise websites run on Apache ecosystem, right? Because it's mature enough. But when you're talking about a big data ecosystem, it is still, I don't think it has crossed the mainstream. It is probably going to cross mainstream this year or next year. And so you're going to see a conflict of adoption in terms of enterprise solutions like, maybe MongoDB or, a HANA ecosystem or, an appliance versus, this thing. Anyway, coming back, I'll give my perspective. I'll come back to you in a minute if you don't mind. I'll give my perspective on the past, present, and future, and where Altisource as a company is positioned. I mean, I represent. I'm part of the data management team. I'm a director of data solutions, primarily coming from the data background. Which is the traditional EDW data mart kind of solution. So if you look at Hadoop, I'll restrict the conversation just to Hadoop about the past. I mean, most of us know that Hadoop had its genesis in the search problem. If HDFS itself was a Google's innovation, and then it had its genesis in Yahoo. Most of them are either a search or an e-commerce blend. A lot of use cases that you would come across is primarily from those two, pattern. But then, for traditional companies like us, we are into the mortgage business actually, which is one of the, one of the dormant users of technology, relatively speaking. It's not the cutting edge when compared to the, e-shop, commerce world of it. But things are changing. What we realize is that even in an industry like ours, there's a hell of a lot of opportunity for us to leverage big data. We are talking about the life cycle of a loan across 30 years. So what we see is that, we can pump what we used to drop data on the floor. What we say is that in the traditional EDW world, we drop a lot of data. We actually take very few data and then we convert it into analytics and then we take it forward. Right? What we realize is that the cost of storage is actually going cheap. So one thing I'm going to, the way we are making bets in terms of trend line around Hadoop is that the cost of storage is going to be plummeting. What you used to think as archival is pretty close to keeping it in a Hadoop ecosystem, from a storage perspective, right? The other trend that we are noticing is that I'm going to make a very bold prediction here, and I know a lot of people have gone down the holy grail, talking about predictions. Hadoop is dead, right? When I say that, what I really mean is that Hadoop in its original avatar is not going to be what we see in the next 2 years. You are going to see Berkeley actually coming in with their BDAS ecosystem, mainly driven by Spark. So the compute engine of Hadoop, which came from MR, is actually going to be replaced, in my opinion at least, through the Spark ecosystem. And we have placed enormous bets on that particular ecosystem. So for the right store, we are looking at concepts like data lake. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. I don't want to throw terms here. But in terms of the data storage itself, we are looking at a very cheap ecosystem built around HDFS. And for the compute ecosystem, we are going to look at Spark ecosystem as a primary vehicle. And then we are moving up the stack here, and we are looking at the convergence of search and approximate databases, which is Blink. If you haven't heard of it, I strongly recommend that you actually take a look at it. It's extremely powerful in terms of searching for information and so on and so forth. So these are three major bets that we have actually put you can talk about Altisource Labs as a entity here, and those are the areas that we are pioneering and doing some interesting experiments there. We'll talk about a little more on that. Sorry, you had a question. Would you like to? Sure.
So I have a little bit confusion with this Hadoop architecture.
Sure.
That whether really we are really confused why we are keeping age-based high, both the concept, why we are keeping MapReducer as a Java platform or framework, and also we are allowing our components also, managing everything together. It's a nice orchestration. But whether it is from confusion or it is the future world requires both to keep.
Right. I think that's an extremely fair question, which is the Hadoop ecosystem is evolving so fast. I think Anthony also mentioned it. It is moving so fast that you cannot even predict what is going to happen next year. I'll give you my response, and then I'll invite opinion from the panel here. Any new technology goes through a lot of evolution. I mean, we've seen it with artificial intelligence. We have seen it with the 486, 586 of the world, and we have seen it with Windows computing. There used to be X system, Linux-based X systems before Windows actually became popular from a GUI perspective. There is going to be a certain amount of uncertainty in how the stack evolves. I think Hadoop ecosystem is actually going through that, and there will be a point in time, I don't know when, but there will be a point in time when the ecosystem will have to mature, for the sake of the community at least. It will have to mature, and a lot of tooling will have to be built around that stable ecosystem. Right now, there is a lot of competing technologies. You can talk about HBase competing with Spark on Hive or Hive on Spark. So if you are a novice, it can be very, very confusing, and I do empathize that particular problem. Hope I hope the industry takes notice of that, and we hope to find a solution around it. Let me invite the panelists' view on this. What do you think about the Spark ecosystem? I mean, the Hadoop ecosystem. I mean, the maturity of the ecosystem and how it poses a problem or how it introduces creativity. Does anyone want to comment on that?
Sure. Well, I personally think the diversity is not necessarily bad. It's something that you see in big companies, whether it's a financial bank institution, for example. You will always end up with sometimes even hundreds of teams working on completely separate pieces of software. So it's kind of normal that you see the same with the big data. You can use some R, Python, MapReduce in Java, Scala, Clojure, and so on. So it's not necessarily bad, I think, but we definitely see many of those technologies maturing, and some of them will probably become obsolete, while some others will take over a big part of the market. So I guess the time will show what will happen in the future.
All these technologies, what we talk about big data, talks about storage, retrieval, and the speed at which the retrieval happens. So this is where we present different kinds of architectures. But the real problem is something else. Now let's assume that suppose you want to look at the planetary positions via telescopes and store this data. You would have 1 terabyte of data per day. You will have 1 terabyte of data per day per planet or per star or whatever it is. Now the real engineering comes about how you manage this big data. It's not about the storage and the retrieval of the raw data. Now in his talk he talked about how to remove the noise. So in every social media, in every place where you record data, you will have a lot of noise. So the architecture that has to evolve, or the architecture that has to fine tune itself, is about how we engineer this data, not actually consume raw data. It's not about plotting graphs with several billion records in a database. That graphs are useful for very limited decisions. But on the other hand, remove the noise from the data, consolidate this data, and present meaningful records that derive business decisions. That's where companies are trying to do a lot of research and development on that. Quoting on his example, for example, he quoted in one of his lines, we are into this mortgage business. What will we do with a lot of big data on this? We are mostly not on this side of technology. Recently we had a contest. One of the young fresher who brought an idea for a mortgage business, what he did was he analyzed all the North American banks which were into home loans and all that in a particular segment of North America along the coast. What they did was, he said, if there is a cyclone that is hitting, he made a predictive analysis of how many assets will get hit and what will be the forecasted loss for this company if a cyclone would happen between this and this place. And you won't believe that predictive analysis proved exactly right in the recent cyclones that happened. So this was a contest presentation he made. What he compared was the data of mortgage loans that were distributed and the assets that were insured. So he compared the data where the lending company and the insurance company were the same. And he said, if you are the lending company and if you are the insuring company and all these assets along this coast get damaged because of a cyclone, this will be the predicted loss for this company. And it proved exactly the same.
I think that's a wonderful example, actually. Just to clarify, what I meant was it was perceived in the mortgage industry that you would not use a lot of data. But we have a lot of examples like that. I'll give you another example, which is, we actually do a lot of modifications in the, people have heard about mortgage crisis, the prediction of whether a borrower is going to go default, whether he's not going to make his bank payments on time and hence the home is going to get foreclosed or not, is a huge business opportunity. Yes. And that requires tons of data about his behavior, his purchasing pattern, his work information, his credit rating score. You have to blend all of this data and to be able to go one step further and say he is probably going to likely to default 3 months from now, and that makes a difference. So that you actually help him lower the mortgage, you do modifications as we call it, and we are one of the successful players in that industry. So the point is, even a traditional industry can make use of data, and the power of data is what I was referring to. That's a fair point. Now I want to swing the conversation towards a customer perspective. Now one of the questions that a lot of people ask me is that, is Hadoop a technology chasing a business problem? Is Hadoop a technology chasing a business problem? Because a lot of times we tend to hear business problems from a certain domain, like e-commerce, search, and so on and so forth. Or is there enough business problem to solve through Hadoop and the Hadoop ecosystem? Does anyone here who has a customer-facing experience, mainly from consulting background, want to take that? Any one of you want to answer that particular question? From a customer's perspective, are we force-fitting the customer through a Hadoop lens, or is there a natural problem in Hadoop that you have seen in your experience? Do you want to give some examples? Anyone?
I can definitely start on it because I used Hadoop with my customers. And it's definitely helping. I mean, of course, there is a very good reason why Hadoop is so popular. Like, we like to believe that real analytics is going to take over soon, and I do believe that Spark or Storm and similar solutions will take over. But there is a very good reason why Hadoop is so popular, and it's because you cannot do what you can do with Hadoop, you cannot do with many traditional technologies. Sure. So let's say that we had this problem where we needed to analyze. It wasn't a huge big data problem, I would say. It was maybe around 30 terabytes data per month. But if we would want to analyze it with the traditional database, we ended up paying many thousands pounds to purchase the hardware that was able to solve the same problem. That instead, we just threw all this data into Amazon Web Service, and using Hadoop, we were able to do exactly the same computations using perhaps just few $100 per month. So you see there's like an order of magnitude difference between what you can do with Hadoop and traditional database.
So, when we talk about analytics or big data, most of the times big data means Hadoop, which is really not the case, because Hadoop really solves a batch processing problem. And that is just one of the technology. There are lot many technologies and lot many problems available in big data space. There will be real-time analytics, like Radix said, or there are graphs, distributed graphs, or NoSQL technologies. So why there is so much of obsession about Hadoop really? Because it doesn't solve all of the problems. So why then look for a problem and then say that this technology fits into that problem?
Yeah, let me try to take on it. Very relevant question. So whenever we talk about big data, fortunately or unfortunately, the discussion gets diverted onto Hadoop. The reason I think is Hadoop probably is the first mover or first comer technology, and it became it attained the level of popularity which makes it obvious to become a center of the discussion. But if we really go out, big data does not really equate to Hadoop. And there are at least 50 different technologies to talk about when we deal with big data. There will be definitely more, but I can quickly think about that kind of spectrum of technologies. An example would be Elasticsearch. So Elasticsearch is one of the very latest search engine type of technology wherein you can deal with massive amounts of data. In fact, it claims to have capability to search across infinite volume of data sets. As long as you give enough room to grow, then it can handle, and it can give the results in fixed amount of return time of the query. So Elasticsearch is one, and there are whole plethora of visualization technologies. To name a few are like Graphite, Tableau, Kibana, and many more. So there are so many other technologies, but Hadoop, because of its first mover advantage, it's very popular. And it has solved some real problems also. So I think that's what I feel about the things.
Yeah, I think you had a very nice point, because sometimes you see people saying, okay, I want to move or jump into the data analytics and big data, so I want to put Hadoop on my. I mean, you don't need to use Hadoop at all, and even you can use data analytics with relational databases. Data analytics is. When you deal with a lot of data, it's true that you will need to have a scalable technology. The Hadoop is a solution, but you have also Cassandra, for example, and you have others. There are several of others. So I think that the Hadoop was maybe is now the most trending and the first, and a lot of new modules have been developing on top of it. So probably it's also the most popular, and that is why usually even me, when I talk, maybe I say Hadoop, but it doesn't mean that it has to be Hadoop, of course. That is a good point. I mean, you can use another one.
I'm doing a quick time check here. I think we have another 5 minutes, maybe maximum 10 minutes. I would want to encourage participation from the audience, please.
Yeah, hi. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have somebody here. If you don't mind, I'll come to you.
Yeah, hi, my name is Pranav, and we are a big data startup. I have a question to Amit. Like we started that, the origin of big data started with the sources, because at macro level, if we talk about big data, there are three main things. One is the sources, other is the technology, and that definitely we have some logics to handle the problem, right? So as you said that, I really feel that we do marketing and retail primarily. So from that perspective, what can be the futuristic, critical data sources besides the traditional one like IoT or machines or social media, which startup should focus on to become early movers in next coming years? Second question is, we talk about technology. So many startups, they start something called Hadoop or Spark, and they go deeper in that and solve customer problem. So should we have a width in the big data space that we should know 10 technologies and we can solve a couple of problems using our own logic, blah, blah, blah? Or should we stick to, let's say, Spark, because we are Spark players, and we go deeper inside that, and we can solve any problem using Spark only and leave Hadoop and everything aside?
Domain of the...
We work with marketing and retail.
Okay. So, yeah, first and foremost, we don't start with technologies and then try to solve the problem. I would say we should start with the business problem itself. What is and define the problem clearly without starting to think about what technologies I'll be using to solve the problem, because it will actually dilute the business sense. So let remain fully business focused, define the business problem very clearly, and then involve the technology people so that they will be able to solve the real business problems, maybe it with just Spark or with say 10 other technologies if need be. But typically speaking, if you see a large conglomerate of technologies trying to solve one problem, there is a problem with the architect who is trying to solve it. That's my perspective. I believe in simpler architectures are always superior, more scalable.